I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you're definitely going to love the justice in our title story. Here's our first one. Become the worst neighbor and HOA board member ever? Lose your job and HOA. Posted by Dogalagapoo. Let me start by saying, never purchase a house in an HOA. It is a complete mess that should be regulated and illegal. If I knew about HOAs when I bought my first home, I would have never purchased my first home in one. Me and my wife purchased our first home when we were 24 and 25. We spent months looking at houses and areas and tried to find a forever home in a good district for potential future kids and so on. We finally found a perfect one at a decent price. At first, everything was great. Super nice neighborhood and decent neighbors. Well, a few months after buying the house, we rented an RV to go on a trip, and we parked it in the driveway for the 3 days leading up to the trip so we could pack it and so I could learn how half the things in it worked. Well, this is when we learned that HOAs are absolutely crazy, and our neighbor was on the board of our local HOA. Within an hour of it being parked, he got home and stormed over, demanding that we remove it from his neighborhood or he would have it towed and fine us for every hour it was there. Myself, being the average and normal person, told him kindly to screw off and to get out of my driveway, and told him if he returns, I'll call the cops because he was screaming like a madman inches from my face. About 3 hours later, a big rig tow truck shows up, and he walked up like he was a god and handed me a plain envelope with a letter inside that pretty much said, "By the order of the HOA, this RV is to be towed," and a fine of $1,500 for violating their rules. While Mr. Crazy board member might not listen to reason, the tow truck guy they found wasn't so fond of entering my driveway and towing a vehicle when I told him that if he comes on the property, I'll call the cops. Once the tow truck driver decided that he's done being involved in this mess and he left, the neighbor goes even more crazy and storms off. I call my friend to get his dad's number because he's an attorney to ask him about this insane letter and the fine I just received and to ask him some legal advice. After speaking to his father, he told me to come down, write him a $500 check, and bring along all the papers that I received when purchasing the home and the current letter that I just received. The next day, he had a very friendly letter sent to my neighbor and the HOA board, basically telling my neighbor to screw himself in legal terms and to leave us and our property alone. I then continued to receive fines of $1,500 a day in plain envelopes not postmarked stuffed into my mailbox that I then turned over to my friend's father, and each time he sent another set of letters and contacted USPS to report the incidents. Turns out, putting mail into people's mailbox is a crime. Who knew? Well, we decided to go on our week-long trip across the state and mildly, forget about it all. Kind of upset that I had to spend $500 to have an attorney send letters, but that's what they do. Fast forward to us returning from the trip and the RV back in our driveway for 2 days so we can unload and clean and then return it. Again, each day, more envelopes stuffed into our mailbox, and more visits to our attorney, and more letters sent, and more incidents reported to the U.S. Postal Service. Well, here is where the fun really begins. Turns out, Mr. Crazy finally gives me a summons to appear before the board. My attorney said this is crazy illegal because what they've done is use what looks like an actual legal document improperly to summon me to the board. Another $500 to the attorney, and we wait for the date that they made, a Tuesday at 10 a.m. They attempt to keep my attorney out of the room on some board privacy rule, but they quickly shut the heck up when he begins going over their own rules that they are violating to them. Deep in this HOA book are some very nicely worded rules and stuff outlining about what makes board members ineligible and how they cannot serve if they commit certain infractions. Well, guess what Mr. Crazy Neighbor has done? Committed several of them, all documented. Also, the cherry on top is that if 51% of the HOA members vote to dissolve the HOA, it all goes away. Well, it happens that my wife worked part-time from home during this mess and had all the free time in the world to begin a disband the HOA campaign. Over the course of the next 2 months, she went around and really began to get to know our neighborhood really well. Turns out, a lot of people dislike the HOA and the power-hungry seniors who act like dictators that run it. The HOA attempted to stall everything by holding no meetings, another HOA violation, and began their own campaign trying to change HOA rules to keep from being ousted, and a fairly racist flyer and letter to everyone explaining the dangers of not having an HOA and all the black people, African American and Mexican people, that will move in and take over or sell drugs and so on, that our houses would become much less valuable and everything else they could try. Turns out, it's extremely fun to use someone else's rules against them. The neighborhood even started a fund that paid us back what it cost us to get the attorney started and the continued costs that he had. A few weeks after their failed fear campaign and being forced to hold a meeting, a vote was called by using their own rules. The HOA was no more, and all the remaining funds were to be dispersed back to the homeowners and the members equally. This never happened. Turns out, somehow, the HOA used all their funds in the course of the last 2 months. About half of the former board members sold their homes and moved, including Mr. Crazy Neighbor. I've spent 3 hours trying to find old news articles because it was reported on mostly due to the racist letters by the HOA, but it was too long ago to find anything. Moral of this whole mess: don't buy a home in an HOA, and if you do, plan to hire an attorney. HOA board tries to force me to remove my trampoline. I get them removed from the board instead. Posted by Hi Internet Friend. Hello. I put a trampoline in my backyard in early 2017. I have 3 young boys and we've enjoyed it immensely. My neighbor, the HOA president at the time, went to sell his house in the spring of 2018, and his realtor said that the trampoline in my backyard might be a detriment to getting top dollar for his home. So he convinced the neighbor on the other side of my house to complain as well. Out of the blue, I received a message from the HOA property manager that the neighbors complained and that I would need to submit a form to get it approved. Intermission. What's sad is that I was friendly with both of these people. They had been in my home. They could have talked to me face to face. With one of the neighbors, I paid for our shared fence at her request, since her neighbor on her other side wouldn't contribute to their shared fence, another board member and human piece of garbage. I would have been willing to dig a hole for the trampoline to hide it more, or to purchase a new one with elastic bands rather than springs to make it quieter. Both of those options are cheaper than getting a lawyer. But nobody asked. Nobody came to me to have a face-to-face, heart-to-heart discussion about their concerns. A few ironies. These are 5-bedroom homes. Clearly, people with kids are gonna move in, and they're gonna be noisy in their backyard with or without play equipment. The guy who sold his home smoked like a chimney. I don't think my trampoline should have been his top concern. The people who ended up buying his home are a great family with 2 kids who don't care about toys in other people's backyards. My neighbors have raised kids to adulthood, one of them 2 very active boys. When I pointed this out to her, the words that actually came out of her mouth were, "I know it's challenging to raise boys, but we are at different stages of our lives," as if that justified her trying to screw me. Back to the story. I filled out the form and then sent it in. The Architectural Review Committee denied it a month later. I appealed the decision, and then I met with the board in August. They sent me a letter and said it was in violation. I asked which rules I violated. They never sent me a letter, so then I asked again a week ago. The property manager was adamant that she had sent the letter, but I asked for proof. She forwarded an email where she put my name in the to field after the fact. I had a strong suspicion that it was after the fact due to the following reasons. An HOA meeting was mentioned that never took place. The responses to my questions varied in color, indicating that they had been edited at different times. She responded immediately to my request for proof by indicating she would forward the email, but then took an hour, presumably editing a draft that she never sent. She cited a rule early in the email, but then cited an additional rule later that superseded the first. The first cited rule could have simply been omitted. The message was not marked as forwarded message at the top, and the sent time didn't include seconds. None of these things are a smoking gun, but they are suspicious. I asked the other people in the to field if they received a copy of the email with my name in the address field. The only honest member of the board replied that he hadn't. The rest remained silent because they didn't want to look like they and the property manager had dropped the ball. Intermission. If you're curious why the board didn't like my trampoline, here is the rationale provided in the letter that was never sent. Due to the close proximity of the homes to each other and the small yards, the trampoline is unsightly to the homes surrounding it. Realtors for those homes surrounding you have stated that it is a detraction to selling homes and is lowering the home values of those around it. There have also been neighbor complaints regarding the noise level, which creates those homeowners to be unable to enjoy their homes. They are also unable to use certain portions of their homes while the trampoline is being used. My kids all weigh under 35 pounds. They go to bed at 7 p.m. and they don't jump on the trampoline in the morning before 10 a.m. My neighbors bought homes 10 feet away from mine. What did they expect? Back to the story. The year-end meeting was scheduled for yesterday, and 4 board positions were up for election. I got 3 of my friends on the street to run with me. I went door to door every day for a week, and I spoke with the majority of homeowners about their discontent with the street. I got a third of the community to sign proxy forms stating that I would vote on their behalf. I went to the meeting last night and put these fools on blast. I listed calmly all the ways the current board was failing the community and my plan to right their wrongs. The vote was a landslide in favor of myself and my friends getting elected. One awful board member remains, but he is the minority. We fired the property manager who was uncommunicative and flat out dishonest. The trampoline endures. The only bummer is now I have to manage a street which includes some legit crazy people. But this whole episode has convinced my wife that we will never live in an HOA again, which I count as a huge victory in addition to the trampoline remaining where it is today. This story is called, If I Already Live in a Neighborhood and the HOA Tries to Claim It, Am I Forced to Join the HOA? When my sister bought her house, she was the 3rd person to buy in the new neighborhood. They signed the papers and started making payments before the HOA was established, so the HOA was not mentioned in the paperwork. Over the next few years, my sister and her then husband erected a basketball goal, added a covered patio, an in-ground pool, and a large storage and workshop. They bought one of the 2 lots on the very tail end of the cul-de-sac, so their lot was huge. They still had way more backyard than most people. They took very good care of their home and yard and so on. The shop was painted to match the house, and the basketball goal was kept in tip-top shape. Enter the new HOA. My sister declined to join it, and they decided to ignore her letter of refusal and started sending her violation letters for the shop, the basketball goal or hoop, the patio, the paint scheme, right down to the dogs they had. 3 is permitted by the city, and we have no breed restrictions. My sister returned all the letters with a copy of the refusal to join letter, along with a copy of the registered mail receipt showing they received it. They started fining her. She kept doing what she was doing and pulled in an attorney friend who was more than happy to take over. The HOA finally took her to court. Her lawyer countersued, presented all the paperwork to the judge, and the judge not only found in my sister's favor, but the HOA had to pay all of her attorney fees and had to reimburse her for all the postage fees that she paid responding to the letters. She always sent them registered mail. The judge was incensed by the matter, especially when he saw her original letter declining the request that she join the HOA. Do you know that they kept trying to fine her? She sent them copies of the original ruling, and they again ended up in front of a judge. That judge ruled the same as the first one. The third time, the judge yelled at the president of the HOA, the attorneys, and told them if they didn't leave my sister alone, he'd cite them for harassment. My sister's attorney said if they continued, she could sue the HOA president, all of the officers, along with the attorneys, both professionally and personally for harassment. The HOA left her alone after that. She has had to run off some of the HOA snoops that she's caught peeking over her privacy fence trying to see what's in her backyard and ended up slapping a restraining order on them. The HOA had to reimburse her for that too. I, for the life of me, don't understand why people would spend their hard-earned money for a home and a lot they don't have control over. No way would I ever live in an HOA-controlled community. Do you agree with this commenter? Let's see. HOAs are effectively microcosmic fascism. They say you own the property, but then tell you what you can and can't do with your property while charging you a tax or HOA fee for the privilege. About the only thing they don't do is have you and your family killed if you disagree, but even that happens sometimes. The world has enough layers of government with narcissistic dictators running them, so why subject yourself to another? If you don't like HOAs, don't buy into HOAs, and if you're already in one, abolish it. But if people are stupid enough to live under the tyranny of one, too bad, suckers. I gotta know what you think about that one. Oh, I'm on private property? Posted by One Cardiologist 462. I used to work for a supermarket chain, and quite often, I'd be asked by management to work at other locations. Most of the time, this wasn't a big deal. I was happy to help out. It gave me an excuse to drive and have the petrol paid for. However, one day I was asked to work at a location very far away at a very early hour of the morning. I initially refused on the grounds that I would have to wake up at around 2 a.m. in order to have a shower, breakfast, and drive to be on the site for 5 a.m. After some arm bending from management, I finally relented and begrudgingly agreed that I would do it. Due to the drive not taking nearly as long as I initially expected, I arrived on location at about 4:30 a.m. I waited in my car with the music playing, and at 4:50 a.m. I get a loud knock on the car window, nearly making me jump out of my skin. It was the manager for that store, who, never seeing me before, did not know who I was. The conversation went as follows. "You need to leave. This is private property." "Oh, but I don't care. Go now." Me, quickly realizing I can play this to my advantage. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't want any problems. Of course, I'll go right away. I'm sorry." And as per his Karen request, I drove home with a smile on my face, knowing that I have the rest of the day free to myself. A few hours later, I get a phone call. I answered the unrecognized number, and I recognized the voice immediately. It was the Karen manager who told me to leave. Hello, I'm looking for Austin." Yeah, that's me. This is Mr. Karen calling from this location. I was expecting you to work here with me today. You should have been here for 5 a.m. Me, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I was there waiting in my car. You told me to leave, remember?" But you didn't say that." I interrupt him. "There are no ifs or buts. I was on private property and I was asked to leave. I was legally obligated to do so." Right, but don't you think it doesn't matter what I thought? I was asked to leave private property. I'm not going to break the law and risk getting in trouble with the police." It was at this point he hung up on me. I expected to get in trouble for what had happened, but I never heard anything more about it. More info from OP. I was paid for the gas money and the travel time, but I was not paid for the shift. It was originally going to be a day off anyway. I suffered no financial losses whatsoever as a result of this, and my local manager never spoke about it, and I never mentioned it to him. I did not suffer any disciplinary action. Yes, I did have to wake up early and lose out on sleep. OP, this is such a perfect example of ask before you make assumptions. You know what assuming makes? Assuming makes a what out of you and me? I just love to reference that. Tell the HOA my kid's too loud? Okay, deal with him some more. Posted by Queen Pate the First. So I went to visit my mom yesterday, and she told me this story. My brother, he's 9, likes to play with other boys on the block. They usually play soccer or bike races outside and then Fortnite or FIFA 22 online. All this during the afternoons and evenings after they're done with homework. They can be pretty loud, but they're ages 8 to 12. The neighborhood my mom lives in has something similar to an HOA. They have a representative and they have to pay fees, mostly for security and surveillance, even though it is very safe. And the rep is friends with my grandma, who also lives there. So, on a Thursday, the rep calls my mom to tell her that someone complained that the kids were being too loud and it was too late for them to be alone outside. Mind you, it was like 7:30 p.m. They don't have school the next day. The street is pretty illuminated and has cameras basically on every light post. Also, the neighborhood is pretty much gated all around. My mom calmly told the rep to ask the person complaining to call her directly because she was actually outside speaking with the other kids' parents as they were watching them, and this is a family-friendly neighborhood. Rep started getting defensive and said that she didn't want to cause conflicts and making up excuses, and that was that. Later on, the rep was chit-chatting with my grandma and said that her nephew, who lives a few houses from my mom's, was having trouble with work because, quote, there's too much noise outside, end quote. So mom knew that he was the one complaining. Here's the thing. He is basically fresh out of college, which means that he hosts parties from Thursday to Saturday or just blasts his stereo while drinking alone until 4 or 5 in the morning when he passes out drunk. Kind of hypocritical, if you ask me. Anyway, cue my mom asking the boys to play right in front of his house and yell as loud as they can. My brother's curfew is 8 p.m. so he can get a good night's sleep, but my mom and the others' parents extended it to 10 p.m. because they didn't have school the next day anyway. The dude never complained again, but my mom did report him every time his speaker was on after midnight. He eventually stopped, except for a party here and there, and all was well. Update. The problem isn't the complaint in itself, it was that the same dude who plays loud butt music 3 nights a week until 5 a.m., thus disturbing all the neighbors and their sleep schedules, and goes unpunished because he has family in the HOA, has the gall to ask for others to quiet down when others have asked him the same, and he responds by getting louder. I get that kids can get very rowdy, and I know my brother is, but when asked to be more quiet, he does accommodate, and so do his friends. I guess if a 9-year-old can be quiet when asked to be, and a grown old adult can't, the problem aren't the kids' parents. Sued my HOA. My lawyers destroyed HOA Karen in court. Click the video on your screen so you find out how, and I'll see you there.